All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon study. We are in the book of Exodus, and we've walked slowly through. Last week, we went through the actual Exodus out of Egypt, and now we come to chapter 14, where we'll discuss the crossing of the Red Sea. So many things to look at as we watch the Exodus finally of the children of Israel. And it culminates in verse 22 of chapter 13, where he says, he did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from the people. So he was leading and guiding them through. Chapter 14 seems to take a turn, for their travel. So let's get into it. There's 31 verses. Let's do the first 10, the second 10, and then we'll read the final 11. Who would like to read? And just as an order of expression in how we do it, whoever reads gets to express what they see in the verses first, and then we move to an open discussion and explanation of the verses. So who would like to read the first 10? Ameka's hand is up with the quickness, like Jeopardy. Go ahead, brother.
All right. It says, and Yahuwah spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Yasharal, that they turn and encamp before Payah-hirath, between Migdal and the sea, over against Baal Zephon. Before it shall you encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Yasharal, they are entangled in the land, the wilderness has shut them in, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them, and I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his hosts, that the Mitzrayim may know that I am Yahuwah. And they did so. And it was told to the king of Mitzrayim that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people. And they said, why have we done this, that we have let Yasharal go from serving us? And he made ready his chariots and took his people with him. And he took 600 chariots, 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Mizraim, and captains over every one of them. And Yahuwah hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Mizraim. And he pursued after the children of Yasharal, and the children of Yasharal went out with a high hand. But the Mizraim pursued after them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen, and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea beside Payah-hirath, before Baal Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Yasharal lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Mitzrayim marched after them. And they were sore afraid, and the children of Yasharal cried out unto Yahuwah.
All right, so what's going on here, brother?
Man, it's so interesting because you see Pharaoh going after them again. It's like, we know Yahuwah hardened, it says Yahuwah hardened his heart, but it's like, man, don't they remember? It's like, how soon did they forget about everything that had befallen them? It's how, it's amazing to see how soon they turned back into trying to dominate over a people who had been the cause of so much of everything that befell their country. So I'm just looking at that. But once again, Yahuwah's hand is at work here, so it's not, this is not normal. So we can't expect anything normal. When Yahuwah says, I will do something, you better expect there to be some abnormality in the way people are thinking. and using their senses. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I differ a little bit in the understanding of it not being normal, because I actually think it is normal. When we look at as Pharaoh in Egypt represents the world is the same way. When disaster strikes, there's a brief conviction or a reckoning of wanting to turn and do right at that moment. If you look at 9/11, after the Twin Towers were hit, or blown up, however you see it, there was a influx, an inrush of church membership. People wanting to get their lives right, and then it died down immediately after because they weren't truly convicted. And I think we see that those whose hearts turn towards Yah, truly turn towards Him and truly have faith in Him. So I think in terms of it being a natural course, but in terms of being a spiritual turn and a true turn, it would not be normal for one who has turned to Yah to then turn away. But for them to get convicted, truly convicted, they would not have gone after, but they weren't. It wasn't, and then Yahuwah's hand was on it, orchestrating everything anyway. So this was a purpose. Everything that's happening is being funneled through Him showing Himself who He is, not only to the children of Israel for them to be encouraged, but for the world to see who He is and how He, systematically tore down all of their belief system, all of their gods they believed in, and now He'll show mightier than even this roaring sea that they're gonna embank on. So it's a motion by Yah to show Himself mighty as well. So all of it, I think, plays in, and we can see ourselves in this same picture as we look at the world. So when you say normal, it is normal for the world to have a short attention span on what is right and what is wrong, right?
Yeah, no, I like that you mentioned the conviction, because thinking about it from that aspect, absolutely. If the conviction is not true, it doesn't, is only short term, then absolutely it's quick to go right back to your old mentality, your old way of thinking. So no, absolutely, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. JP.
It's interesting how Yahuwah tells them where to go and how to camp. Like he says, okay, go over here, camp here, and then like wait. And it was just to read that portion and to see that verse 4, it says was it 4? Because it ended up saying that he's not hardened Pharaoh's heart. But I mean, I guess the question I was wanting to ask is just, I guess, the way that Yahuwah is doing this to engulf them, like we know with the water, and the flood and over them when they pursue them. And so it's just like, I guess it's just a reason of why, like questioning, like why, like, wow, this is like Yahuwah is showing, he's going to show his power and his might over these people. And so, because I mean, just, I guess that's where I started with my question in my mind is like, he actually told them just to camp out here and wait, and I'm going to do something. And of course, they don't know yet what's to be, but that was just some thoughts I wanted to share. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. In verse 4, he says, then I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And then he says, gain honor, and then we look at that and we see how, Pharaoh, if we go all the way back to chapter 5, when Moshe and Aaron first went to Pharaoh, we see not only did Pharaoh treat Yah's men with contempt, he treated Yah with contempt. So this would be Pharaoh's final defeat. Yah is going to show himself mighty, and he's going to gain honor with not only the children of Israel, but even with those that are Egypt that are left over. There are going to be those to go back to tell the story of the mighty Elohim of the Israelites. So there's a full purpose in what Yah's doing here. He's letting himself be known as well. So he's intertwined not only the orchestration but the elevation of himself amongst the people by action, right? He's not a Yah of words, he's a Yah of words and action, right? He is true to his promises. The very thing that he introduced Aaron and Moshe to in the beginning of the chapter are the things that carry out all the way through up into and past this point as they're about to look at the Red Sea. Because if you look at history, the sea, the roaring waves, were a battle that couldn't be defeated, by folks. People wouldn't even cross oceans or seas at times in the roaring fashion. And we have a Yah that sets the people up at the shore, to a seeming slaughter as they're trapped, and he parts it and they go through. And then he fights the battle that they were afraid of, as we're going to read in the next several verses. So there's a lot going on here in setting up this story as we're reading it and we watch it unfold. Yah doesn't just do things. He doesn't. There's always a purpose. There's a purposeful meaning for what he's doing. If he set it up, if he told you to do thus and so, it's a reason. There's a cause and effect to what he tells you to do, what's going to happen, and then his response to the things that happen afterwards, always to get his point seen, right? So we've seen that all the way up until this point, and we're going to continue to. Brother JP.
Also, just to mention, just these locations. I'm gonna look up a map and see, just to see where these locations are. I think a lot of times, we go and we're always talking about these locations, see the historical evidence of where this place happened. So I'm gonna find a map, but I think I would encourage everybody to continue when they see locations in the Bible to look at a map to see where they're at, so they can get a better visual. There you go.
You can't really see that, but there's a map.
Yeah,
you
can't. Yeah, but I mean, because I think like a lot of times it's benefited me when I go and research the location, because then I'm able to actually see it and not be so just like, oh, Egypt, like, until I really seen where Israel was as far as on a map. I was like, wow, like it's like right there, in this area of, and you can actually see, the Egypt and Israel, and you can see all these countries around us. So I would definitely encourage that. Just to, I just want to throw that out there, just as a encouragement,
Yeah, no, that's a good point to, to topographically be able to visualize it and see it. When I look at, some of the paths that, in the Brit that Shaul took, and even Yahusha when he was traveling, places he avoided, purposeful places, and then you look at it on the map and you said he went all the way down here just to get here, but there was a reason why he did it. You know what I mean? It's good to visualize it as we have maps to show us exactly where these places were. Pi Harothi, Migdal, Baal Zephon, Pi Harothi seems to be, from what I looked at, was a translation of an Egyptian name, perhaps meaning dwelling of harbor, or Hotspur, or something similar. Migdal means tower, and might refer to some topographical feature, right? And then Baal Zephon means Baal of the north, a name suggesting that the Canaanite religious ideas had extended in this region, all where they were. So not only were the Canaanites there, but they had the Egyptians that followed them. So it's important that we understand, what's being said here and why these names are being mentioned. I thought that it was interesting in verse 3 where it says they are bewildered by the land. Bewilderment. What does that mean? The wilderness has closed them in. So they're literally trapped as they get to the seashore, right? Between the Egyptians and the sea. And, as we go on to read, we'll see, their response to it. What do we do when we're seemingly in defeat? Do we scream? Do we cry? Do we stamp our feet? Do we say, why us? We're going to see what the Egyptians said, and we can put ourselves in there. More than likely, we would do the exact same thing, but these are opportunities for the faith that we say that we have in Yahuwah. Because, it's easy to trust in Yahuwah when everything's right, when everything's going right, when the money's tight, when all the foods in the cupboards are packed full, refrigerator, you can't put anything else in, when you're stocked up, when you have safety around you. What happens when you're in the wilderness? What happens then? So we have to be mindful of the opportunities that we have to learn from what's happening here with the Israelites and encompass those things in our own lives, in our own situations, because Yahuwah is going to put us in the same situation, right? We talked earlier about, being close to Yahuwah. What about when he seems not to be close? What about when it's not sin separating you from being close to Yahuwah? What is the purpose of that? It's for our learning, it's for our understanding, it's for our growth in our faith as we read throughout Scripture. When we look at Job, when we look at David, when we look at Saul, and we see those times when we look at Habakkuk, who starts off saying in the book of Habakkuk, why do you hear my cry, but yet you don't hear my voice? You don't respond to my voice. We have to be mindful of those things, because what do we do then? Right? They're trapped. Let's visualize that, right? Should they have wavered? Sister Linda.
I didn't even know that my hand was up, but I guess it meant to be up, because I was just listening to what you were saying and everything, and I agree with you, so much. I was sitting here pondering on in the 10th verse when it talks about how the children of Yasharal or Israel was so afraid. And I started thinking about fear has been prevalent in our lives for such a very long time and everything. And I was just looking, Googling it, and it says that fear not was used 80 times in the Bible. The Father continuously said, fear not, because, the enemy, he uses fear to decrease our hope and limit our victories. And that's another thing that we really need to really overcome is our fears. The word tells us in 2 Timothy, I think it is the 1st chapter, in the 7th verse, that Elohim has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. And when you begin to talk about this wilderness experience, what do we do? What do we do when the onslaught really comes? When this fear is real, because fear is a real thing. All of these things of not having provisions and lack, all those things are real. What do we do? Those are all of the sustaining principles that we need to put in context and in place now. I was saying to my oldest son, I was asking him as we was driving out to Myrtle Beach yesterday, I asked him, I said, okay, so now you've been doing all these things to prepare for any type of, adverse situation where we might need to, sustain ourselves. We're talking about what we need to protect ourselves. We're talking about all the things. We're beginning to put away foods. We're talking about, we're taking inventory. We know we're going to need this. We know, but what are we going to do about internet? Because we don't have any type of substitute for that. When it really goes down, how will everyone communicate themselves? Is there anything that we can begin to prepare for now other than just broadband radio? He said broadband radio's got about 250 miles. How will we all ever be able to communicate again if it really went down for that? I don't know if I'm taking this a little bit out of context, but this wilderness experience and being faced with the impossible and the onslaught is behind you and you don't have anywhere to go. And I know we have to depend upon the Father with all our heart, and I believe that he's going to provide for us miraculously. But in the sustaining process, what are we going to do about internet, Elder Rod? Is there anything that we can begin to incorporate now that we can communicate with one another? Because that's going to be a very, very essential thing.
Yeah, good question. June, is your hand up to answer Linda's question, or you wanted to speak on that as well before I say something?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, it's an excellent question. One a few of us have been looking into. Ham radio, if you're familiar with that. There's some of us that want to get what's called a ham radio. And interestingly to note, they had locked down the ability for people to get licensed, because you have to have a license for ham radio. But January of this year, they opened it back up. So it costs $35 to get your license. And I can't sit here and articulate it well, maybe someone else can, but somehow through a repeater frequency or something like that, it can go beyond your state. You can actually, like, I can talk to Michigan or California or, South Carolina. So I'll try to send you some information on that if you're interested. And yeah, we need more people to get set up.
Oh, very much. Thank you. Wow.
Brother Kevin, you wanted to say something there?
Sister June was right on point. I myself have gotten into that and looking into the exact same thing, where there are family channels. They're not so much for the repeaters, but the licensing, the test, it's not that complicated. But after that, then yeah, you could jump to ham radio or CB radio in those manners. Then it gets really technical. Antennas, grounding, power source, etc.
Oh, look, Poppy's holding up one right now.
Yep, that looks exactly like the one I have. Well, matter of fact, I have a couple of them. I've been working on this here for the exact same reason. What happens when all this technology goes down, if it when? But she's right on point. She's definitely heading in the right direction, and maybe the network can be established once everybody's up with their equipment. Then they can establish a network, preferred channels. You can even get into encryption. It really gets deep, but she's on the right direction for sure.
Yeah, I'm all for that. June kind of takes that portion of our family. She's big on that. But I want to steer us back to what's going on here, and I would say that what we see here is the opposite of that. They're not saying what can we do to get ourselves ready here. Yahuwah is showing them that he's going to get them out of this situation. The dependence here is solely on him, not what they can gather together, not what they can conjure up, not the radios and all of that. Not telling anybody not to be prepared and not to get radios and communicate with their family. But in this passage, they are trapped between the seashore and the Egyptians, and they can only depend on Yah here. So that is the ultimate picture. No matter what we prepare ourselves for, it's him that we place our dependence on. So So we have to look at that and put, this passage in its right context in for our understanding. Praise Yah. Let's what else we see here in this passage? We talked about Pharaoh's defeat. We talked about, gaining honor amongst all of those that could see what was going on, not just with the Israelites, but abroad. I see a couple verses here that possibly cause an idea of a contradiction when it talks about the 600 chariots and the horses. Like, there's a lot of people that say, well wait a minute. Weren't all the beasts, which would have included, the horses, the mules, weren't all of the cattle, which would have included the sheep, the oxen, the cows, weren't they all dead? Where did these horses come from? But Yahuwah specifically said in the previous chapters, as we look at the plagues in chapter 9, it was those in the field. And then there's, idea coming from history, but it's not in scripture, that says that the Israelites sold horses to the Egyptians. But apparently the horses that were inside of the homes were not affected by the plagues that hit the beasts that were in the field and the cattle that was in the field. And again, the Israelites' cattle was not affected. So it's not a contradiction here. Brother Rick?
Yeah, there's some interesting placements of these alephs in here. But before we get into those, in the verse 2, I find it very interesting where it's, as I'm reading this and I'm looking at these words here that are speaking, and it's a little bit different than what they're saying in the translations. As I'm looking at this in the lexicon, it's showing here, the first thing that caught my attention is where they're between Migdal, which is a city on the northeast border of Egypt, or Mitzrayim,
Right.
at the sea. And then it goes on, and you shall camp in front of Baal Zephon, which is basically the name of Baal, the deity Baal, and the north or winter, opposite the sea, basically. So that one, I've been pondering now why that's in there, what that actually means when it's actually using the actual name of another deity in here. And the other thing that caught my attention was, let's see here, where it talks that he will be honored. What was that? That was verse 4, I think. Yeah, verse 4. And as I'm looking at this, let me get back in here to verse 4, because that one was very interesting, where it talks about that he will be honored, but that's not really what the translation says. Let me get to that point here. Where does it say here? Oh, and it says, and that word that said that they're using as honored actually is kabod, and it means to be heavy or heavily burdened or weighted. So basically, the way it's saying is that that he basically hardened, or he strengthened the heart of Pharaoh, his inner man, to pursue pursue after. And then it got that word heavy or weighted or burdensome instead of I will be honored. So it sounds like it's going into this flow of what he's placed upon the Pharaoh, of a heavy burden on the Pharaoh and all of his armies that were basically pursuing after this. And I find it interesting that he's continuing the same verbiage that he used all the way that we've been reading, how he's hardened, that he will harden Aleph Tav, the Pharaoh's heart, in verse 4. He's back to that again, where it seems like he's putting this desire in the heart of Pharaoh one more time to inspire him to pursue after the Mitzrayim. And then it goes into verse 5 where it says, and then they're questioning, why have we done this? That we have let Aleph Tav, the Yasharal, go from serving us. So now they're having this doubt. Why? So this is what he's put in their hearts. It's almost like an anger, I guess, or something, where they're now upset that they let him go. And now I think that's why they pursue him. And then he goes into verse 6 where he says, and he made ready Aleph Tav, his chariot, and took Aleph Tav, his people, with him. So we see that, again, Yahuwah is even using his covenant as this is part of what he's going to destroy because of the hardening of their hearts, because of them dishonoring his ploy for them to let his people go. He's putting this in the heart of the Pharaoh and his soldiers to go after and take back what they let go. And then we see in verse 8 where it says, Yahuwah hardened the left top of the hearts of the Pharaoh. So now he's put that hardening into his heart as part of his covenant again to make all of this come to pass. And I think it had to do because of all the things that he went through with Pharaoh, that he wouldn't give up and surrender and actually acknowledge who Yahuwah is, where we see in verse 10 where it says, and when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Yasharal lifted up Aleph Tav their eyes, so they were able to see it for what they were, and it, for whatever reason, and they again didn't trust Yahuwah after all that he's done to bring them out of this. They didn't trust him, and they were fearful because they were seeing all of these chariots and all these armies coming after them, and they're pinned in. And what a time for Yahuwah to raise up and show himself here, yeah? Because they had no other choice. Just like you were talking, this is a good example of us in our lives, in our walks, where we got to know his covenant is upon us. And he will make other people do things that they wouldn't normally do to fulfill his will for your life and for my life, to set us free or whatever it needs to be done here. But it's very interesting how all these Aleph Tavs are placed in places you wouldn't think they would be, but it makes sense when you start to see it. But I guess the one thing that I really not sure is why is that Baal in there, Sephon? Why does it use that term? And I guess I'm trying to find out what the reasoning that they use that, or what does it mean? Is it just simply a place? But it doesn't sound like it the way that I'm looking at it in the breakdown here. It doesn't seem like it's almost making another statement of, because we know Baal is another deity that of the north, basically, is what it's saying here, Baal of the north. So he's in between that, All
right, so I want to address two things. First, Baal of the north, from my research, it showed that, that there are places that may not be known today, like where you can put your finger on the map where they were. But Baal Zephon means Baal of the north. And I have a name suggesting that the Canaanite religious ideas had extended to this region. So it's very possible that it's showing, there was a Canaanite people there that did not believe in Yah. So it's kind of showing the Israelites being surrounded by things not of him to where they would need to be delivered. One of the things you also talked about was, honor. Verse 4, it says, then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am Yahuwah. And they did so. So if we go back to chapter 9 and we look at verse 16, he says, but indeed for this, speaking of the plagues of hail, for this purpose I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. So this honor was to show that. Remember, Pharaoh was looked at as an Elohim, to his people. him doing the things that he's doing, he's given the Israelites an opportunity to be chased out and cornered by the Egyptians on the edge of the sea where they can't get across, surrounded also by the Canaanite people, so that Yahuwah would be the only salvation that they have. He is showing himself to be the deliverer. He is also showing himself to be the only Elohim over what they are facing. As you read in verse 10, they're scared. They're frightened. Fear in as we looked at the plague of darkness, they were so afraid that their hearts failed. Fear is crippling. Fear will debilitate you. The reason that we're not supposed to tie into fear is because it completely takes us off the track that Yah has for us in having faith in him. They can't coexist. We can't be fearful and have faith. So one has to die, and it has to be fear. So this position that they're in being cornered, ushers in the opportunity for Yahuwah to show who he is and being the only way of salvation. So that's what I would say to those things.
I can see that, but I guess the one thing I'd bring it back to is that word about being honored. I don't understand where they got that from or how they got that in there, because the definition doesn't even fit that. It's all about burden or weighting or heavy. Heavy, that's the definition. Heavy, weighty, or burdensome.
Over the Egyptians, right? A weight.
Yeah, a weight, a heavy burden, but it doesn't, I don't know where
he literally weighs them down and drowns them in the Red Sea, as we're going to see. So at the same time, he's expressing who he is. You know what I mean? So weigh them down, show himself in a higher position, so.
Okay, I guess that makes sense what you just said there. That kind of makes a little more sense, even though that's not the definition for that. I don't know, but I guess in what you just said, I guess it can assume that also is a definition. Okay.
Sister June, and then Jadiel.
I came in kind of late. How far have we read to?
Verse 10.
Okay. I was going to point out something in verse 11. I'll wait on that. In verse 4, and pardon me if someone else already pulled this out, but as was said a few times, that Yah was doing this to show, him, to flex, and I am Yahuwah, and he more or less says this directly to Moshe. He says, but I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army, and the Mizrites shall know that I am Yahuwah. And it just reminds me of his sovereignty, and sometimes we don't know. Well, in this case, they should have known because he's flat out telling them. But sometimes we may not know, what the Father's up to. And, he's sovereign, and he has his own reasons and purposes. And in this case, he wanted to show, that he's Yah, basically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Brother Jah.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, brother.
All right. I wanted to, there's kind of a lot. I wanted to point out a couple things. A lot of times when Moshe is narrating, sometimes he narrates the name of a place before it's actually named that place. Like when you look through the Genesis and Exodus, when they say, and they went to this place called Sukkot. It wasn't called Sukkot when they first went. It was called Sukkot. Sorry. there's many times where he's saying that this is a place before it actually becomes that place. You know, so I know that Rick mentioned the Baal Zephon, and like why was it named that place? And a lot of times when they're conquered, or sometimes Moses is writing this in a further in the future, so he's like recapping as to what his experience was walking through the wilderness and coming in contact with the different places and stuff like that. You know, so that we need to probably consider that as well. It may not even be the Egyptians that named it that, but when Egypt was conquered by Babylon or destroyed, whatever, you know, because remember, Babylon is the king of the north, and when I was reading in Jeremiah this week, it talks specifically about how Babylon was going to come and destroy Egypt and take over. So, you know, Baal Zephon means master of the north, which would have been Nebuchadnezzar. He probably renamed that when he destroyed that place when he was conquering. But then I also wanted to talk about the word Baal. Baal is not necessarily the name of a deity. I know that there's a lot of information on it, but just looking at context in scripture, sometimes in the virtuous woman chapter, if you look at the word husband, her husband is known in the gates. That word husband is Baal. And it was referring to like the master of the home, not necessarily the name of a deity. So if you guys check out the virtuous woman verses to look closely about that word Baal. And I wanted to read one more instance about Baal in Judges 3, just so that way when we're looking at it, there's a difference. Every single nation has gods with names, and even Egyptian had 10 gods with different names. They were not, you know, all called Baal. And I like that Rod was saying that it was a Canaanite, referencing the Canaanite, because Baal is a Phoenician word that later on was stopped being used after a while. So in Judges chapter 3, you start to look at how the word Baal is used. And so in verse 5, starting from verse 5 in Judges chapter 3, it says, the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. They took their daughters and their wives to be their wives, and gave their daughters to their sons, and served their Elohims, or their mighty ones, plural. And it says, and the children of Israel did evil in the sight of Yah, and forgot Yahuah, their Elohim, to serve Baalim, it says. Baalim. And the grove. So it's calling the gods of Canaan, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. They don't all have the same gods, but they're all, that's Baalim is plural. Baal is the word for master, and Im, you probably know this already, is the pluralizing. So he mentioned all these nations, and instead of saying all of their nations' gods, he just said Baalim, saying all of their masters. All of you served all of their masters. So when we're looking at the word Baal, it can be utilized in a general sense to a person or to a mighty one, but the mighty ones always have a name. So I believe that word Baal Zephon was referring to when Babylon took over Egypt, or a kingdom, Assyria took over that area of Egypt, and they named it Baal Zephon. So sorry about that. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's very, very insightful. You know, specifically, I like what you said about, you know, the Egyptians, because we just went through, you know, as we went through the plagues in the previous chapters, we pinpointed on the name of each Elohim of the Egyptians that Yah was tearing down, and they all had different names. You know, it wasn't just one. You know, we looked at Geb, you know, of the soil, and Apis, and Hathorn, and you know, Sekhmet, you know, and Shu, and Nut, and Horus. We looked at all of those names and how they each classified with a specific plague, and the water, the soil, the insects, you know, all of the sky, you know, the sun. So all of these were worshiped, and Yah was tearing them all down one by one. So no, I think, you know, the idea, or the truth of the idea of the name Baal and the way you expressed it and how it can have different meanings is a point for us to make sure that we are looking at how it's contextually used as we read through scripture, so we're not thrown off, you know, because that can happen real easily, right? So yeah, praise God, brother. Sister Amy.
One thing I would like to interject before she says is there's actually two types of Baal. There's actually the name of a deity, and then there's another one that actually has to do with being a master or lord. One is the Strong's 1167, which means master or lord. And then you have the one that this was referring to, which is the actual name of a deity, but which is Baal. That particular is 1168. So there's two different Baals in there. So when we're looking at them, we should also pay attention to maybe it specifically is talking about a deity that actually has the one that's been trying to steal the name of Yahuah, as we see in a couple scriptures from his people. But these are two different Baals here that they're referring to, the one that you were speaking of in Judges versus this one, or one that's referring to a deity. So they're not necessarily the same just because they're spelled the same, I guess, would be the same. I guess my point. One saying it's a deity name and the other one saying it's a lord or master. So that's the only thing I want to interject in that, just because when we do look at it, we should dissect it even that a little bit further to make sure it's the right word or the right terminology, I suppose. Not saying that you're wrong in that sense. I'm just saying there's two different strong numbers, I guess, for that. And one says it's a deity name and the other one says it's lord or master, like an owner or something.
Good stuff, brother. Ja, you want to respond to that, or? All right.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to work on it through my phone. No, I definitely understand. I mean, the way that Baal and Baal, they both mean literally mean the same thing. And based off of the context in Judges, they didn't name those deities in every single nation Baal. So the word Baalim was a general word meaning masters to all of those deities. So even the word that you're talking about, it's a general word in the scripture that I read, because it wasn't the name in the context in Judges chapter 3, verse 5 to 7. You know, I just used the one in Proverbs to show that it's a general word altogether. You know, you call your husband Baal, you know, people wouldn't even dare. But to look at the fact that it's a general word, and I went to Judges to show that the other word was used generally too for many other gods, because we know that every nation didn't serve Baal; they served, you know, Chemosh, Malek, all these different gods, you know. So Judges chapter 3, verse 3 to 7 actually supports that the word that you're talking about is used generally and is not an actual name, even though the Strongs may have said it's a name. The context shows that it's referring to all of those masters or all of those lords that they were actually worshiping, you know.
Yeah, good. This is a good dialogue here. We have to make sure that we're looking at, you know, these words and understanding their meanings, you know, so that we don't have a false idea of what's being said here. Context, you know, dictates what Yahuah is telling us. The moment we step out of that context, we don't even see the picture anymore. We're blind, you know. So praise Yah for this conversation. All right. Anything else there in the first 10? We covered quite a bit.
Sister Amy had her hand up when I.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. That's right. Go ahead, Sister Amy.
No, sorry, I just want to mention a device. Remember, we done the study where on the word saffron. Saffron is the darkness. It's very interesting when you put that word in there. So it would be Bali of darkness. So it would be like lords of darkness or gods of darkness, or which I find interesting because we know in script from when Brother had done a study on the word morph, and it says no longer will people say as Yahuwah delivers out of Mitzrayim, Egypt, but Baruch Huah, who delivered out of the land of darkness, and brought us back to our Adama. The word is used, our own loyal, which is Adama, which is our original husband, which represents the husbandman, Messiah, because when I done a study on the word Baal, and husband and mother and stuff, it's interesting to find the first himself saying, no longer will Israel call me Baal, but they will call me my husband. So not just husband, but my husband. I think it's very important because it's about deliverance from and I long this day as well myself. The darkness, complete darkness, completely annihilated, delivered. And when we go to Daniel, it said there's a master the south, or a lord the south, or a king, Malach, the south and north, and they make up against each other at the end and park their tents somewhere in the middle of the sea. He puts up his tents in the border of the sea, but he shall consume. So the God darkness, I think what I find interesting in studying the word darkness on both ends scale, like positive and negative. Positive, it's word, actually the name Zephaniah. Zephaniah means hidden one of Yah. So it's also interesting to note that it says that Yahuwah clothes himself in darkness. So darkness can be used as a good thing in a hiding place, but then it's obviously context in Exodus. It's saying that, for me, it's saying the lords of darkness or the gods of the underworld, that's to be saved. So it makes sense to me in context. I could be off, but I just wanted to.
Yeah, we heard some of what you said. It was kind of choppy with your connection.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even know you just stopped me. I've got my headphones. I'm using my phone, so I don't even know.
Yeah, I was trying to just let you talk. But it's cool. It's cool. All right.
Sorry, so you didn't do anything. That's all I said.
All right, brother Will.
Yeah, I was just contemplating here on this word of Baal. I guess in scriptures it's used as Lord as well. And I thought about this verse in 1 Peter 3, in verse 6, when it mentions that even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord,
right,
whose daughters ye are as long as you do well, and are not afraid with any amazement. So that totally proves to me that the word Baal is used even in this manner.
Absolutely, master, head of the home, for sure. Every morning I wake up, June calls me Lord. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I call him Baal.
Well,
touche. Good one. But no, that's a good passage to show how it's used. Will, thank you. You got me good on that one. You better watch out.
Yeah. I've laughed today, but that did make me laugh, Sister Jude. And just imagine you get and say, "Hey, Ali." Oh.
All right, let's bring it back.
Sorry,
Let's bring it back. Joke's over. So we're in verse 11. Let's look at verse. Rick getting a kick out of that. Who wants to take verse 11 to? I set myself up for that one. Who wants? All right. David has his hand raised. You want to read from verse 11 to verse 20?
Okay. And they said to Moshe, because there were no graves in Mizraim, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore have you dealt with us to carry us forth out of Mizraim? Isn't this the word that we did tell you in Mitzrayim, saying, let us alone, that we may serve at the Mitzrayim? For it had been better for us to serve at the Mitzrayim than that we should die in the wilderness. Sir, what line got you?
Verse 20.
What verse? All the way to 20?
Yes.
Okay. And Moshe said unto people, fear not, stand still, and see at the Yeshua, or salvation, of Yahuah, which he will show to you today. For at the Mitzrayim ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. Praise Yah. Yahuah shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And Yahuah said unto Moshe, wherefore cry you unto me? Speak unto the children of Yasharal, that they go forward. But lift up at your rod, and stretch out at your hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Yasharal shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden at the hearts of the Mitzrayim, and they shall follow them. And I will give me honor upon Pharaoh, and upon all his hosts, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the Mitzrayim shall know that I am Yahuah, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the angel of Elohim, which went before the camp of Yasharal, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Mitzrayim and the camp of Yasharal, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. Wow. Hallelujah.
So that definitely goes into what Amy was speaking of, how it was a light to the Egyptians, but it was darkness. I mean, a light to the Israelites, but darkness to the Egyptians. You wanted to share anything of what you read?
Well, I just want to say, praise Yah, that he's so good to his people, that he's so awesome in his power, and that when we are closed in and there's nothing for us to do and we're crying out to him, that he will save us and deliver us, and he'll do supernatural wonders for us. I've seen it happen in my life. I had cancer. I had a 6-inch tumor in my colon, and they went to operate on it, and it was gone. And I was closed in on every side. I thought I was going to die. But there were people praying for me, and I was praying, and Yah delivered me from death. So glory to Yah. Hallelujah.
Praise Yah. Which brings to mind, we need to pray for our sister Nisha, whose father is going through something similar with his colon. We'll do that later. But no, I mean, there is deliverance needed. I wanted to look at verse 11 though, and just kind of stop there for a minute. So we watched the plagues, right? We talked about how Israel had clearly seen the hand of Yahuah, all throughout all of the plagues. He delivered them, out of Egypt. And they come to this point, verse 11, then they say to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Like Okay, so we didn't die in Egypt. You know, you brought us out here to die because there weren't any graves there for us to be buried in. You know, why have you dealt with us to bring us out of Egypt? You know, is it not verse 12? The word that we told you in Egypt, saying, "Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians." For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. You know, and you know, we look at this statement, you know, and it refers back to verse 5 when Moshe and Aaron went before Pharaoh, and then they had that response, and then they made things harder for them. And he was like, man, we didn't need, look, we had it hard enough. We didn't need you to go and speak for us for them to then make it hard on us. We'd rather you not say anything. Now that comes full circle, they get delivered from not just the plagues, but from Egypt, and they're on the seashore where they're turning around and seeing the chariots coming, right? And they see in front of them the roaring sea. You know, to them, it looks like death. You know, when we talk about, you know, faltering, you know, what do we do? You know, let's put ourselves here. What do we do in a situation where it's imminent death? Is it immediate trust in Yahuwah, or is it fear? Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, you know, for nothing else to reach for? Or do we truly have faith in our prayer to Yah to deliver us from the situation that we're in? And I think that's where they are right now. They're on the threshold of what they truly have faith in. They can't see a deliverance here. They only see death. That's why they're talking about graves and the fact that here is where we're going to die versus there. And I think we have to look at that and understand that we have these times in our lives where we can only see him, where there's nothing for us to do. We can't reach and do anything in our own strength, which is exactly where Yahuwah always wants us. He always wants us in a point where we can't fend for ourselves, because he is the one who fends for us. He is the one who fights for us. He is the one who delivers us. We can't pull ourselves up. He has to pull us out, right? So I think this is where we find ourselves here. Brother Mecca.
Something very interesting I seen in this was in verse where was it? In verse 15, where it says, and Yahuwah said unto Moshe, wherefore cry you unto me? And I thought this was very interesting because, you know, as we've seen so many things done by Yahuwah, you know, it's almost like, why would he ask Moshe this question? Like, why are you crying unto me? You know, and then he tells him, tells him to speak unto the children of Yasharal that they may go forward, but lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Yasharal shall go on dry ground and through the midst of the sea. And so I kind of see like Yahuwah almost it's very similar. I feel like this is very similar to when the disciples were all on the ship with Yahusha, and the waves are sitting there beating and tossing the ship around, and they're like, yo, they're all scared and panic, and they're like, yo, Yahusha, master, like, yo, do you not care that we're all about to die? It's almost like the same. They almost said the exact same thing. And Yahusha's like, yo, oh man, like, where's your belief at? And he gets up and he commands the storm and the waters to be calm, and it's calm. And so I kind of see like, you know, it's almost like Yahuwah's telling Moshe here, like, why are you crying on to me? Where's your belief at? You know, and throughout the New Testament, you know, we see how, you know, even Stephen the martyr, you know, when he's rebuking, you know, the people, he's telling them like, you know, our same fathers that went through the wilderness without belief, you know, you know, and so it's very interesting because I kind of see these two similarities, you know, and Yah's trying to show the people like have belief, and you know, Yahusha of course says, you know, if you have belief the size of a mustard seed, you shall say unto this mountain, move, and it shall move, and nothing shall be impossible to you. So it's like, where's our belief and our knowledge of, you know, being Yahuwah's children, you know, being in his likeness, and the fact that, you know, there is power, you know, there is power that for us that are walking according to his ways, there is power that comes from him, you know, within us. And so really to have belief in that and begin to, you know, walk in that belief and exercise that belief. And so, and I just thought that compared with what the disciples did on the ship was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy with the disciples. I think also too, you know, I like how Moshe in verse 13, you know, he's hearing the Israelites cry to him, you know, whine, stifle, shudder their feet, you know, but he doesn't respond to them harshly at this point, right? He encourages them. He says, and Moshe said to the people, do not be afraid, stand still and see the salvation of Yahuah, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. Yahuwah will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. Verse 15, and Yahuwah said to Moses, why do you cry to me, as Ameka brought out? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. So now is not the time to quit, he's telling them. Now is not the time to turn back. You can't go back either. You know, keep moving in the direction that I told you to go. Lift up your rod and watch what happens. You know what I mean? Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Wait on him. You know, so he encourages them, and then Yah answers him and delivers them in spite of their fear. You know, so good stuff. June, then JP, then Amy.
Yeah, in verse 11, they're definitely expressing fear, but they also seem to be complaining almost in a sarcastic way. Yeah. Like, dude, we were doing better off in Egypt. What do you know? How, you know, what are you doing here? But I think it was important for them to get in this what appeared to be impossible situation, because the esteem for the deliverance could go to no other but Yah. Absolutely. You know, of course, you know, he performed a miracle to get them through. You know, so, you know, the more impossible the situation that we're in terms of needing Yah, the more he gets the esteem when he comes through, because literally it could only be attributed to Yah and nothing we did or nature or, you know, happenstance or anything else.
Great point. You know, Yah wants his esteem to go to no other. He says it in scripture. It all goes to him. All glory and honor and praise goes to the Father. Even, you know, as we read in Psalm, I think it's 93, 93 or 95, where it speaks of the waters raising up to Yah. You know, all things give praise and honor and esteem to the Father. Good point. Sister Amy, then Sister Poppy. And they were complaining and being even, it was a bit of sarcasm in that as well, I would say.
I don't know why, but when you were reading it, and when people have been speaking, the thing that came to me was Yahusha, as he went into the wilderness process in the 40 days and 40 nights. If I look, when I'm seeing him, like I think you said something important, Brother Ode, about it depends on the circumstance. For example, like when we look at Yahusha, He cried out to the Father in the wilderness, sweating blood. And he was like, can this be removed from me? Like, is it a possibility? And obviously we know after he did that, he then was pushed and then obviously led to his death afterwards. And that's what I'm kind of seeing. Obviously I'm seeing like a mirror image of Yahusha here. Like, obviously I know they're complaining. He's not sarcastically complaining when he's asking the Father to remove the cup, but what I'm trying to stress is, you said it, when you said it, it stood out to me. It depends on the circumstance. Like you said, it's not time for you now not to have belief. As in, like, because sometimes it's testing times. Like we know that Messiah was taken to the wilderness and he was tested. His faith, his belief was tested. The enemy was there consistently in the wilderness, and so was the Father. So the enemy was laughing at him and trying to discourage him. And then we have the Father, obviously, Messiah. We see Messiah have an ultimate belief in his Father. You know, we see the image of the standing on the, the serpent's head and crushing his heel. You know, crushing his heel with the head of the snake, with the doubting of the snake as it's speaking. And I find it interesting that in this transition that they're going through, I'm trying to understand why, because I don't want to say, oh, you know, they complained. I wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to believe that I'm better or different than what they were, because I don't think we are, because there's nothing new under the sun. So would we act the same? Maybe not, because we've got a book to look at today. We've got a reference to go off. We've got scriptures, and we got the renewed covenant. And back then, did they have manuscripts? Did they have?
Well, I mean, I think what you're seeing here is a natural course of the human mind and heart, because you have them being directed and you know, by Moshe through Moshe by the Father. You know, you told us to do this. We followed you here, and this is the outcome. That's their posture, you know. But it's different from Yahusha, because Yahusha knew what he had to go through. He knew what was coming. He had a brief lapse of reality, but then encouraged himself. You know what I mean? Whereas the children of Israel needed to be encouraged. And then once they saw what happened, there still was a required faith they would have had to take that next step through the sea that was parted. And then their faith got them to the other side. But they had to be coerced, whereas Yahusha, you know, he encouraged himself. So there is a difference, but I understand how you can see the connection between that moment in time where you briefly doubt, you know, that I'm supposed to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that I'm supposed to be here, or in the case of Israel, that I should have listened to you. You know, you told me to come here, but man, it would have been better if we just would have stayed where we were. Because I would have rather just put me in the ground, you know, leave me on the ground. You know, you're going to leave me out here giving me a false hope, and then I'm going to still die? You know, don't forget, you know, they're seeing the chariots coming. You know, it's not like, you know, there's no reason to have fear. There's a human attachment to what they are visually seeing. Just like it's a human attachment to what we go through in life. There's a reason when, you know, we have news coming from our doctor about our physical health that we get afraid. When we hear news about something, when I hear news about something happening in Philadelphia where all my family is, and I'm concerned about what's going on with them, you know, there's a visual fear that they see coming their way. But Yahuwah is saying, don't look at that, look at me, because I'm the deliverer. I'm going to take you out of this situation. And I think the focus needs to be readjust, that we need to wipe the fog from our eternal lenses and always keep our eyes on him. That is the focal point of what's going on with them. And it's the focal point of what you just read of Yahusha. He did. He wiped his own lenses and said, "Nah, not my will, but thy will be done." You know, and then carried on, and then we know that he became our Mashiach.
It's crazy.
Praise God. Sister Poppy, and
Yeah,
then
I
Sister.
don't know if you can hear me. My signals. Does anybody?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. Go ahead. Say.
Yeah, I don't know if it's me or
Yeah, you're breaking up, sis.
You're really choppy, Sister Amy.
yeah, you guys are picking up for me as well. So maybe I need to go out and come in on my phone.
Okay. Sister Poppy.
Shalom.
Shalom, sis.
I want to preface this with something I was really, really blessed to learn, listening to someone's testimony. They were talking about a trip that they had gone to, I think, Jerusalem, and they were just sitting there at the top of a path, and all these sheep, just hundreds of sheep, just started coming in their direction, and there was no person there or anything, and they were just watching these sheep just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. And then at the very back, they saw two men just walking behind them, and both of them called out at the fork in the road, and the sheep just split apart and walked according to their shepherd. You know, they knew their shepherd's voice. They heard him. And the man got to talk to the shepherds and say, "Why do you walk behind? I figured a shepherd would walk ahead." And he says, "That's how we watch our sheep. We watch over them from behind. That's how we know if one strays off, and we can get it and we can keep track of them." And the reason I brought that up is verse 19. It says, "And the messenger of Elohim, who went before the camp of Yasharal, moved and went behind them. He got in position of the shepherd." And that's how I connected it. That's how I see it. I just thought that's beautiful. He was going to shepherd them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, he shepherded them, you know, and the dichotomy of the picture, you have the protection and guidance, and then you have the darkening vision of the Egyptians behind them where they couldn't see. So that is, you know, you're talking about being delivered, you know, literally being delivered. Good point, sis. I like that analogy, that story. Sister Linda.
Yes. First thing I wanted to mention was is in 14 and 13 when he talks when Amasha spoke to the people and said, "Fear ye not." We already dealt with that part. "Stand still and see the Yeshua of Yahuah, the salvation of Yahuah." When the Father, when he moves in a situation, we all know that there are no limits. He operates in ways that are higher than our ways, and ways that we can't even begin to imagine. There's a couple of times in scripture that this phrase is used. It's used in with Jehoshaphat also to stand still and see the salvation of Yahuah when the Father fought on their behalf. But what this really, really reminds me of, to make this applicable to the day for me, is the essential value of seeking ye, Matthew 6 and 33, "Seek ye first the kingdom of Yah and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." Because there's a higher way of living. A lot of times we stop at the natural. We talk about the spiritual, but unfortunately, sometimes we don't attain to the spiritual. But in times like this, had Moses not been talking to Yahuah, and if this would have just been a normal, natural, irregardless of how intelligent they were, deliverance, when it got to that Red Sea, they all would have been killed. So we know the essential value of having to have a supernal or a force that's greater than anything that this world offers. In this particular case, it was government. There's a force higher, there's a power higher than government. And this is the time that Yahuah's children should be seeking for that higher way of living. That's the first thing I wanted to mention, because that's the only thing that really actually makes a difference. The second thing I wanted to mention was the very same thing that was stated in 14:4 that Elder Rick brought up earlier about the hardening of the heart, and how the context of honor being used there is also repeated again in 14:7. And this time it also says that he will get honor upon Pharaoh, upon his hosts, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. When I look at this scripture, as I read it, I see, and I behold, I will harden, I will seize upon the heart of the Egyptians. They shall follow them. And I will be weighty, I will be heavy upon them. I will be the one that will be influencing them. Because you know the kabod, the glory of Yah is a weighty thing. It brings weight. It brings a heaviness. When you're anointed, when you're heavily anointed with the kabod, it's the same word that they use for that. It's a heavy thing. You feel that presence. The Father is heavy upon you. And so what he's saying here is that I'll be so heavy upon them, I'm going to be influencing every one of them. Every last one of them is going to run into the Red Sea. Because if you really, really think about it, when they got to that Red Sea, and they saw that Red Sea open like that, when the children of Yasharal began to go over, do you actually think they would have gone in there knowing that that water was something? It would have been no way that would they even have wanted to go in after them to pursue them there, because that was a supernatural thing, something that they weren't even accustomed of. But the Father was so heavy on them, he made them go in. He said, this is why they will know, because I'm going to make them go in there, each and every one of them, and I'm going to bring my presence upon them and cause this result to happen. That's what I wanted to show. Praise Yah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna look at that again. I don't necessarily see influence. I can go with the heaviness, but I can also take it for what it's saying, and that he will gain honor over them, because I can see where you come up with influence. But I'll look at that again. But yeah, I would say, it was a supernatural thing where they're so hot in pursuit of wanting to regain them back to where they were. The fact that they just went through could have been enough reason for them to go through as well. But we can look at that, even more. Brother Kevin, you wanted to share something?
I think I was following 18, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Yahuwah when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh. We just went through honor, the ups and downs of it, that it also means that he put that weight on Pharaoh upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. I'm thinking that's where Sister Linda was saying, that it didn't matter what they thought. They were going in that water because that's what Yahuwah said. No, get in there and go get them. That's what I took from her.
Oh, praise Yah. Yeah, what else do we see there? Or does anyone want to expound more on what we're looking at now?
Yeah, I was just reading here in verse 19 when it says, and the angel of Yah who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. The pillars of the cloud went before them then and stood behind them. So this angel of Yah, many have understood this to be the Messiah. Is that your understanding as well?
That's my understanding. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I've been studying on this just because I know through scriptures, it pops up quite a bit, and it seems to be a misunderstanding. And I thought I'm gonna bring that up the next time we come across that. Just just so we could talk about it a little bit and see where we're at with this,
Absolutely. 1 Corinthians 10, I believe. Shaul expresses Yahusha being the rock, the water, the cloud, so this is definitely Messiah here from what I see. Praise Yah. Sister Amy.
Can you hear me properly this time?
I do right now, yes.
Okay, hopefully. I think it's when I use my phone and put my face on and the phone can't handle all the information with the video call as well. I'll just do this one. But I think it's interesting recognizing this is where I think Melinda brought it as well. Did kabod or kavod, glory or esteem. Through my own experience in my walk, what I found was when I was transitioning from one place to the next, as in the the Christian church system or something else, I found it interesting that when I was being shown the love of Yah. When I say the love, I mean like the different aspect, like with the love, there's judgment, there's discipline, there's different aspects of, to be a good father, you're a father. So like, if you're a good dad, you discipline and judge that your house properly with discernment, otherwise it's going to fall down. So the word, I keep seeing that when the Father pours out his stuff all over the planet, is glory in this instance, is esteem. When it comes on us, we receive it with on, like, not all the time, but in I'm using an example, we receive it with gratitude. We receive his esteem, we receive his judgment. And what I found is when I was speaking to another pastor a while ago, I was saying, do you not know, like, the fire of Yahuah is the ruach. It's what it's the judgment of his house. It's a good thing because he's judging us now in the earth so that we don't have to be judged later on when it's too late. And I find that people who are unsteady or not following with spirit and truth towards the Father, you see the literal fear soak them. Like in this, we see, obviously, it would have been darkness for the Egyptians, but light to the Israelites. The kabod, the esteem, the glory of Yahuah is a barakah, is within his presence. But to the Egyptians, they'll be afraid. And we can see that. I've seen this with non-believers. I've seen it with one Christian pastor in particular, where I was sent in to witness to him. And I could feel the fire inside me. And I was looking at him and I said, can you not see the fire of the Father? It's like, look at my eyes. And it literally, he looked terrified. And I didn't understand why until now when you're speaking. I'm like, wow, that's what happened. That's exactly what was happening. When we reject him, what happens is our body or our cells retaliate against the whole matter itself and becomes hardened. But when we receive him, it doesn't, because I'm aware that he pours out everything on every living thing, all flesh. But in this instance, we see it going on all flesh. It's right there in front of the Egyptians. They can see, but they're petrified. But the Israelites or the children aren't. They're not. And how are they able to do that? That's great. That's an amazing miracle, just even looking at that. When you look at the people of the world and they're totally petrified and they have no idea what's going on. It's frightening to them. Even to those who are actually been reading their Bible forever. Pastors and stuff, and this was the first time I understood this fire was like a real literal fire of either love or judgment. We choose which one do we want. Our children choose. You choose. What do you want? Do you want to be punished into your room, or do you want to do what I'm asking and see how it works and see how it goes? It's a choice. But the fact that we can see that the kavod is actually being represented here by the Father to the Egyptians. They can see it, but they are in darkness. So it's darkness to them, but a light to us. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it was in the darkness. It was more of a barrier of protection, protecting the Israelites from the Egyptians. You know, it's
Oh, as
interesting
in,
because I was looking at, you know, verse 15, 16, and 17, you know,
you
but
mean as in being hidden, brother?
yeah,
Elder Rod, you mean
yeah,
as
yeah,
being hidden? Yeah, that's the context of, yeah,
yeah,
Zephaniah being hidden. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
absolutely. But I was looking at before, so we got JP next. But real quick, I just wanted to look at verse 16. It says, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground in the midst of the sea. So Moshe lifts up his staff, his rod. And it's not the rod, but it's the wind that Yahuwah brings through. It doesn't only part the sea, but it dries the land. Because, you know, if you get to the bottom of the ocean, it's going to be muddy and slippery, you know, that they would have had to walk through. Would have been difficult for them to get through. But he dries it. He crystallizes it. He hardens it so that it's easy for them to walk across. So, man, this is, you know, you talk about supernatural. These are things that are happening that are like, you know, when you see these things happen, you know, through Moshe being obedient to the Father and him working through the staff, you know, how great that was for their deliverance as they had faith to walk forward. So,
Well, Brother Rod, just quickly while you were speaking, something just happened when you said the miracle of them going over on dry land. That is amazing because I've just seen it in my head. It actually represents us of the flesh because we can be dry or we can be nourished by the fountain of living waters. I don't know whether there's a connection, but as soon as you said dry land, I was like, wow, we are dry when we first come to him. We're desolate, dry, and abominable. And then he actually puts something inside that dry land as well. I don't know whether there's any connection there, but I just seen that as us.
well, it will be the opposite of being wet and nourished from his water
Yeah,
because he's drying it. So I don't know if there's a connection there, but, you know, interesting nonetheless.
It's a
JP.
crossover. I mean, they're actually a crossover point. So there would be a place of testing. You know, they're crossing over this. It's scary. Imagine walking through the sea. Like, would you not be scared if you had to do that now? That would be a bit like, whoa, go through the big North Sea or the Atlantic Ocean or whatever, just all dry, and then you're going to trust and go like right in the middle.
Right. I hear you.
That's a transition. So you either go to the dry land, and at the other end there was a big feast that they had waiting, and
Right. JP.
Shalom, bro. No, I was just looking at that same verse in chapter 14, verse 20. Just note, I mean, I was just looking at it and just seeing how it says that, you know, between the camp, it says, and it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these. And it was just interesting to think about the cloud giving light. You know what I mean? So I was just pondering on that. I think that's what I was stuck on as I was listening to you two. And just how it says, like, there was this, I don't know, I guess that's how I just wanted to leave it at that. Like, this cloud gave light, and how that's interesting, you know, to see a cloud bring darkness at the same as bring light, you know, and how it just so magnificent Yahuwah is to be able to, how he created that at that moment to give that. So I don't know, because I know we were talking about Messiah and so just this barrier that he brought between them two. So, and one side, of course, like I keep saying, darkness, and one's like was light to shield them and to protect them and to so I'll leave it at that. But I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, definitely interesting is you know, as we've talking about, you know, the Israelites being in this position, you know, not just in the position, but it's a situation. You know, it's a real situation for them, life and death, you know, dragged back into slavery, killed even, But yet Yahuwah promises to protect them and to deliver them. And he does it all, with the raising of the staff, Unbelievable picture. I mean, I can't even imagine, other than what we see, as it's visualized in the movies. Imagine what this would have been like in real time, as you're holding on to your little children, and the murmuring and the crying and the pantering and, all of this going on. And Yahuwah saying, look, we don't have time to cry. We don't have time to whine. We don't have time to complain. Move forward, lift up your rod, and watch what happens. And it's almost like, Moshe encouraged them, but it's like he had to encourage Moshe as well, So, but praise Yah. All right, well, we're running short on time here. Oh, Brother Don, and then we'll have someone read the final 10 verses, and then we'll discuss those. Brother Don.
Yes, praise Yah. What stood out to me is verse 19, when he said the angel of Yahuwah who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went before them. That stood out to me, of even though they had fear on their travels, we all have fears, and even our travels in our walk with Yah today in certain situations, which he wants us to totally put our trust in him, all our emunah in him. We don't see it as fear not being upon us because of our situation, but the same as he delivered the children of Israel, he's letting us know he will deliver us out of our situations that seem as though that we can't see him delivering us. But if we put all our faith and trust and belief in him, to know that he is Yah, because he's putting before us, he's paving the way for us that we can't see, and he's even putting protection behind us that we don't realize, that we are in his arms and we are in the ark of safety at all times with him. So the main thing is for us to be aware of, to keeping our emunah all in Yah. Praise Yahuwah.
Praise Yah. And, it's interesting because Yahusha says, that certain acts of great wonders and miracles were not performed. Why? Because of fear and unbelief. Yahuwah can't show himself to you if you're afraid and you don't believe. We are to rid ourselves of the fear and trust and have total faith in him. That's when he shows himself mighty. So, as we look at the actual facts of the story of the well, it's not a story. This is the occasion of what happened. This is the account written down of what actually happened. We can see clearly how Yahuwah was telling them to keep their eyes on him, not to look back, not to look at the water, but to look at him, and that he would be their deliverer. So let's read the final 10 verses. Who wants to read? Anyone?
I'll read, brother.
All right, JP.
It says here, starting in 21, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahuwah caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning that in the morning watch, Yahuwah looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for Yahuwah fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And Yahuwah said unto Moses, stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And Yahuwah overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus Yahuwah saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which Yahuwah did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared Yahuwah and believed Yahuwah and his servant Moses. Wow, I don't know. I just seen a whole different view right now of the water. It just seemed like as if it like crashed over some of them and it came back up or something. I don't know. Like I gotta read it again probably, because I don't know, man. It was interesting.
Yeah, it literally swallowed them up. You know, when you look in Hebrews chapter 11, it says that the Egyptians drowned. That word is swallowed. It's the same word that Yahusha uses in Matthew 23, where he says you choke on a gnat and you swallow a camel. You know, Paul uses it, the same word swallow, when he says death is swallowed by victory. It's an engulfing, it's a heap coming down. When we look at the Psalms and we talk about the heap of the water, the wall of the water, you know, we read it in Isaiah. We see the mighty roaring waters in Nehemiah, you know, speaks of this great wall of water and how it just swallowed up the Egyptians as they followed, you know, back through, you know.
Well, like, and the reason why I say that is because the first portion we see in 21, he starts out by Moses stretching out his hand that the water gets divided. Then 23 talks about the Egyptians pursued after them. Then it says, and it came to pass in verse 24 that in the morning watch, Yahuwah looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire of the cloud and troubled the host of Egyptians. And at that point, he says, and took off their chariot wheels. And so they were just struggling. But I guess I'll leave it, you know, I'm going to continue to look into it more. But it was, you know, I just think from a fleshly man's perspective, as these Egyptians, they come into this position and this water is like raised like high, you know what I mean? Like what were they thinking, you know, and they still went against natural. The what you would look at is, this is natural, like the water shouldn't be up here like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? But instead of like being like, this is definitely out of, like, this is a miracle that's happening, and instead of them using their mind and saying, let's just turn it around, like, you know, because at this point in life they don't got the, you know, all what we feel like today, like they don't have so much. I feel like they were more in tuned in that way of saying, we believe that there's these powers to be. And so instead of them turning around, they still went in there, you know. And then when they were inside there, they realized we made a mistake. You know, we made a mistake. Let's turn back, and it was too late. So it's just, I guess, that natural part of it for me as I visualize it is saying, wow, like I can't believe these people had the audacity to continue on to pursue the Israelites after seeing this water. I don't even know how high it was, you know, but it had to be pretty high, you know. So
yeah, you know, it's interesting in that, you know, it was faith that led the Israelites through it. It was stupidity that led, you know, the Egyptians through it, you know, and how those things can happen at the same time. And, you know, you guys can do this on your spare time, but look up the Gulf of Aqaba, and apparently at the which is an outlet from the Red Sea. And if you look it up, there's archaeological findings of chariot wheels at the bottom of the Gulf of Aqaba. So something you could do on your own time that'll lend to, you know, full understanding of this is an actual thing that actually happened. But yeah, you know, powerful nonetheless how we see, and as we're going to read in the next chapter next week, they make a song about this. You know what I mean? This is something that should never be forgotten, of how they were first delivered and how we memorialize these things because Yahuwah told us to never forget being delivered from the hands of the Egyptians. So praise Yah for that. Sister Poppy, June, and then Brother Donald.
I too was also visualizing and questioning the waters, the walls of waters, because I've seen a movie, I think, at some point where, you know, the water was just a little bit over their head. And I'm thinking, how high? How high would it be? So I just looked up how deep the Red Sea is, and that's today. It was probably deeper at the time. On average, it's 1,610 feet, 1,610 feet. The deepest, or the maximum depth, is 9,970 feet. These weren't like walls to the ceiling of the room I'm in.
Right.
That, wow. That gave me chills just, and then everybody's commenting on it, and I'm like,
even in the movie,
wow.
like they were towers of water, and you can see like there was a divider, almost like an aquarium, where you could see the fish swimming on the side as they walked through, and they were looking from side to side, right? So, you know, that's the best visual we can get, you know, out of what we don't have. But yeah, this is not, you know, they're not walking across a pond.
Or a stream or something, no.
Yeah, you know, Isaiah speaks of roaring waters. That's the ocean. You know, what roaring ponds do you know of? You know, maybe a stream, you know, but do streams swallow up horses and chariots? I think not. You know what I mean? So scripture commentates and gives us a direct and true meaning and understanding of what we have here. This was an ocean they crossed. June, and then Brother Donald. Thank you, sister.
I said, I was thinking about what Sister Poppy was saying. I guess it depends on what movie depiction and what year, because they had different special effects in different years. I actually pulled up the Gulf of Aqaba. Is that how you say? And I wanted to just show it right quick.
Okay.
So it seemed like down here it says Red Sea, and then here is the Gulf of Aqaba. So, I mean, I have no idea. This is worldatlas.com.
Yeah, it looks similar to the map of that time, of that era. But that's where supposedly they found archaeological proof that there were chariot wheels at the bottom. So.
Gotcha.
Yep. Thank you for that visual. Brother Donald?
Yeah, as we were speaking of the Red Sea, it just take me back of all the plagues that Yahuwah had put upon Pharaoh, and bringing the children out of Egypt and all through the wilderness and having miracles and saving them from where they had fear. And then it comes to this big Red Sea that was opening up and to, like you said, dry land. We know that only he gave Moses the power to do so, but we know that came from Yahuwah. But as you said later on, Rob, that out of all of the fear that the people had and disbelief and doubts that they had, even going through the wilderness of all the plagues that Yahuwah had put on Pharaoh. But then when they get to the Red Sea and cross it, and then the army drowned in the flood. Hey, brother, I looked at you when you said this. They sung a new song, and
Right.
and brother, once we're going through, it might not be the Red Sea open for us, but He is taking us through our trials and tribulations too, from our enemies. He's going to save us from our enemies in this United States today, and we will sing a new song. And I wait on that day.
Yeah, there's something that because I coming up is something we used to recite at the church that my mother went to. I can't remember the whole thing, but it said, "Sing unto Yahuwah a new song, for He has done marvelous things." Something in our gates, oh Yahuwah. I don't know if you guys remember that. Some of you elderly saints might remember that, but that's true. We sing a song for deliverance. You know what I mean? And literally, we're going to see that in the next chapter. But yeah, brother, yeah, good stuff, man. Good stuff. Sister Diane, and then Sister Linda, and then we'll close out.
Shalom, sisters and brothers. I hope everyone is it's been a marvelous lesson today. Learned so much, as usual. The question went forth earlier about verse 19, and the angel of Yahuwah was there, speaking in terms of, could that have been Yeshua? I'm in the habit of saying, I'm in the habit of saying Yeshua, but I know you say Yahushua, so I'm going to try to get that out of my mouth. But he's really all in this process. Absolutely. Of them crossing over. I'm taken to verse 13, and Moses said unto the people, "Fear not, stand still, and see the salvation of Yahushua, which He will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you shall see them again no more." And when you go and look up the Strongs for that word salvation, the Strongs for is H3444, and it means Yahushua. So that is another place where He is identified even more so. Brother Rod, you were mentioning in 1 Corinthians that He's called the rock, the water, and the clouds. So when He's used in verse 13 as salvation, He wasn't really called by name, or should we say not His proper name. It was like a pronoun, I guess you could say. And we see Him actually being called the angel of Yahuwah in verse 19. And I too, come to that same conclusion that this is indeed His son. But then again, like in verse 20, which is so powerful, and it came with this cloud, and it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. When you visualize this thing in my mind, we have this cloud. We have the son of Yahusha, Yahuwah, His son, as being the light, as He is once again, we see identified in 1 Corinthians. So here He is. He is the cloud. You know, he is the rock. He is the water. But on the natural too, when you look at this, we have a cloud here that's in between the camp. And on one side of the cloud, it's light, bright light. We don't necessarily say bright light, but it's light so they can see. And on the other side of this cloud, it's darkness. And as you mentioned earlier, there was a barrier, you know, so it's almost like he himself, you know, is the barrier, you know, that separates lightness from the dark. But when you look at this thing, you have a cloud here, which is a mass of something. You know, it's something, it's a mass. And just like the Red Sea was divided from one side to the other, this cloud also, you know, and it was divided because it was one element, it was one mass. You know, it's almost like you could take something and draw a line down the middle. One side is white, the other side is black. So this too was a supernatural, miraculous event that was taking place. And since we do know by archaeology and by the word that this event actually happened, we've spoken about the walls, how the water became walls of water or crystallized, or however, you know, we have different ways we can think about that. And also that the land was actually dry. You know, this is an event that's almost as supernatural as the creation itself. But the main thing I wanted to bring out with this is the presence of Yeshua. You know, how much he is in this particular chapter. So if anyone have any questions about if he really has a presence, you know, verse 19 is not the only place where we show him and his presence. We see it in verse 13. He's called salvation. You know, we see it again in verse 20. You know, he's the cloud. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that out. You know, you're going to look that up with the Strong's number and see what they call his name.
Praise Yah, sis. Absolutely. Praise Yah. Thank you. I see two more hands. We're out of time, but we'll stay on and answer those after we stop the recording. So great study today, guys and gals, ladies and gentlemen. We enjoyed, you know, walking through these verses, you know, as we do week after week, and just get drawn closer to understanding what Yah is saying to us together. So next week, chapter 15, read ahead, and Shabbat Shalom to y'all. Praise Yah.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge him in all your ways. Much avaha, and again, shalom.